Bhumi looked like a woman who had everything under control. Steady job, gentle partner, predictable happiness. But every night, when the house fell silent, she carried a truth she never dared to name. She had never felt anything, not once. Not even with the man she loved. 8 years of affection, routine, and practiced tenderness had built a life that looked perfect from the outside, but inside it was airless. She smiled, kissed, performed warmth, but her body remained a locked room. Each time he touched her, she waited for something to awaken. It never did. And so she learned to fake it, not the sound, but the ease. The calm voice saying, "I'm fine." The slow exhale to hide disappointment. The way she'd turn off the light quickly so she didn't have to face her own stillness. No one teaches you how to name a silence that lives inside the skin. One afternoon, over tea, a colleague spoke casually about self-pleasure, not in shame, but in reverence. "You can't share a body you've never met," she said. The words stayed, echoing through Bhumi's chest long after the conversation ended. That night, curiosity wrestled with fear. She locked the door, dimmed the light, and sat in stillness, heart racing, palms trembling, breath caught between guilt and longing. She didn't know it yet, but what began as an act of rebellion would become a moment of reunion. Because sometimes the first touch isn't desire, it's discovery. Bhumi had built her life on gentleness and predictability. Every morning began the same: the hiss of the kettle, the smell of cardamom tea, the soft hum of devotional songs playing from her phone. Her husband Rakesh would read the news in silence beside her, and they would exchange polite smiles before parting for work. To anyone watching, they looked peaceful, two people who had learned to live in quiet harmony. But peace, she often thought, could look a lot like distance. At 32, Bhumi worked as an interior designer for a small firm in Bangalore.
Loved the order of her profession, the way color, light, and texture could make chaos seem beautiful. Clients trusted her to bring calm to their homes, and she did. Yet her own world remained colorless. She could design warmth into any room except her own body. Growing up, her parents had been kind but conservative. Conversations about intimacy were brief and coded. Her mother once told her, "A good woman keeps her thoughts pure, her body sacred." Those words took root, so Bhumi built her identity around restraint. She excelled at composure, at pleasing others, at making everything look right. Her relationship with Rakesh had started in college, two shy people drawn together by shared ambition. He was patient, thoughtful, never demanding. In the early years, she mistook that gentleness for safety, but as time passed, safety turned into silence. The affection remained, yet something essential was missing: a pulse, a spark, a sense of being truly alive in her own skin. She didn't resent him for it. In truth, she blamed herself. Each time they made love, she felt like an observer, not a participant. She would close her eyes and count her breath, pretending the stillness was peace. When he asked if she was all right, she'd smile and say yes. But afterward, in the bathroom mirror, she would study her reflection and whisper, "Why don't I feel anything?" Her body wasn't numb, it was cautious. Years of quiet discipline had taught it to survive by suppressing sensation. Touch had become performance, desire a foreign language. Her therapist once mentioned embodiment, the practice of reconnecting with physical awareness. Bhumi had nodded politely, but dismissed it. She didn't need therapy, she told herself. She just needed to try harder, to be more romantic, more relaxed, more grateful. But gratitude could not replace connection. One Sunday morning, while cleaning, she found an old diary from her teenage years. Between pages of prayers and school notes, one sentence stood out. "Sometimes I feel like my body belongs to everyone but me." The handwriting was hers, but the truth inside it felt timeless. That evening, she joined her colleagues for coffee. The conversation drifted toward relationships, then intimacy. Bhumi stayed quiet until her coworker, Ananya, 10 years older, divorced, unapologetically free, said something that pierced through her composure. "You know," Ananya said, stirring her cup, "most women think pleasure is something someone else gives them. But the body doesn't wait for permission from others. It waits for recognition from you." The table laughed politely, but Bhumi felt her throat tighten. Recognition from you. The phrase echoed long after she returned home. That night, she lay beside Rakesh, listening to his even breathing, and wondered what it would mean to recognize herself. Not as a wife, or a professional, or a dutiful daughter, but as a woman who was still alive beneath the surface of habit. When she finally fell asleep, her dreams were vivid for the first time in years. She saw a room filled with light and a version of herself standing barefoot, unafraid. She woke with her heart racing, not in panic, but in possibility. Something had shifted, quietly beneath her control. The following week unfolded like every other, yet Bhumi felt a strange hum beneath the surface of her days, an awareness she couldn't silence. During meetings, her mind wandered back to that conversation with Ananya. The body doesn't wait for permission from others. The words had planted themselves deep inside her, growing roots in places she had long ignored. At first, she tried to push them away. She filled her schedule with work, dinners, errands, anything that could drown out the whisper. But every time her hands brushed against her own skin while showering or dressing, something inside her hesitated, as if her body had suddenly become unfamiliar territory. That unease frightened her. She had spent years cultivating peace by avoiding
discomfort. Now she could feel the quiet rebellion of her own senses asking to be felt. One evening, after another unspoken night with Rakesh, she broke. Not in anger, but in truth. Sitting on the edge of their bed, she whispered, "Something's missing." He looked up from his book, startled. "What do you mean?" She searched for words that didn't wound. "I don't think I've ever really felt what I'm supposed to. Not with you, not even before you." Silence filled the room like fog. Rakesh stared, unsure whether to comfort or defend. He reached for her hand, but she flinched, not out of rejection, but out of raw exposure. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "It's not you. I think it's me. I don't even know what feeling means anymore." He nodded slowly, but his eyes betrayed confusion and pain. "Maybe we just need more time together," he offered gently. "More effort." Effort. The word landed heavy. That was what she had been doing all her life, efforting her way through every experience that should have been natural. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay awake, the ceiling blurring above her, guilt pressing down on her chest. It wasn't just about sex. It was about disconnection from him, from herself, from the quiet pulse of her own aliveness. In the days that followed, Bhumi withdrew even further, afraid her honesty had damaged something beyond repair. But the silence between them had a new texture, less denial, more space. Rakesh tried to be kind, making small gestures of care, but she felt the distance growing. The first confession had opened a wound she could no longer ignore. One evening, while scrolling through videos on her phone, she stumbled on a short clip of a woman speaking about self-intimacy. Not sexual, but sensory. The woman's voice was calm, matter-of-fact. Start with curiosity. The body is not a mystery to solve. It's a conversation waiting to begin.
Bhumi replayed the line several times. It sounded simple, too simple, yet something about it felt like permission. Later that night, she sat at her vanity, brushing her hair slowly, watching her own reflection with unfamiliar attention. The face looking back at her was composed, beautiful even, but distant. She realized she didn't remember the last time she had touched herself with kindness. Every gesture toward her body had been functional: washing, dressing, maintaining, never listening. For a moment, she placed her palm flat against her collarbone, feeling the faint beat beneath the skin. Her breath caught, not from arousal, but from recognition. That tiny act, a hand resting where she'd always ignored, was enough to stir something that felt both tender and terrifying. Tears came unexpectedly, not sadness, but release. It was as if every year of numbness had been waiting for her to simply notice. In her journal, she wrote, "Maybe the body doesn't forget, it just waits for permission." Over the next days, she carried that sentence like a prayer. She wasn't ready to act, not yet, but she began paying attention to how she breathed, how her chest rose when she laughed, how her stomach tightened when she felt anxious. Awareness became her first language of intimacy. For the first time, she understood that healing wouldn't come from performance or effort, but from presence. She didn't know it yet, but the night she would finally meet herself, the night everything would change, was drawing near, and it wouldn't be born from passion, but from courage. The courage to stay still and finally listen to her own skin. The days after her confession moved like weather. Clear mornings, then gusts of doubt that turned the sky inside her gray. Bhumi tried strategy first, because strategy had always saved her. Articles bookmarked, podcasts queued, a checklist titled Reconnect. She scheduled date nights, bought softer sheets, even set a lavender candle like a truce flag. Nothing shifted. Routine dressed as romance was still routine. The symptom loop returned. She tensed when closeness approached. She smiled to hide the brace. Afterward, she apologized for being tired. Shame traveled the same circuit every time, and the body obeyed the map it knew. At work, she arranged rooms into serenity, then walked home through noise she carried in her chest. Ananya noticed. "You look like you're arguing with yourself," she said over chai. "It's a debate I always lose," Bhumi answered. "Then change the question. Ask your body something it can answer." "Like what?" "Where do you feel safe right now?" Bhumi didn't know. Safety had always meant compliance. She held the cup until its warmth taught a simpler definition. Safety felt like heat she did not have to earn. She tried mindfulness apps. She tried longer foreplay with Rakesh, narrating when she thought she should want. The more she tried to perform presence, the farther she drifted. One evening, he said gently, "I miss you, even when you're here." She opened her mouth to defend, then closed it. He was right. She was present in posture, absent in pulse. She called a somatic therapist. The first appointment surprised her. No hour of biography, no neat diagnosis. Instead, a chair, a rug, a quiet question. "Where does your breath stop?" "Here," Bhumi said, tapping the top of her chest. "Good," the therapist replied. "We won't push it lower, we'll invite it." They practiced orienting, eyes moving around the room, naming what felt neutral. Window, plant, bowl, light. The body settles when it knows where it is. the therapist said. Then grounding, feet pressed into the rug until the outline of her soles felt real. Only after that did they try the lightest contact, Bhumi's own palm resting over her sternum for 3 breaths. The body always asks before it gives. If it doesn't feel asked, it won't answer. Homework sounded like nothing and felt like everything. Notice 3 moments a day when breath lengthens on its own. Stop at the first sign of bracing. Replace effort with curiosity. She added them to her checklist and, for once, didn't turn the checklist into a test. Progress came in millimeters. On the metro, her shoulders dropped without command. In a meeting, warmth spread across her chest, the body's first sign of safety, not desire, though both would one day meet. She wrote these observations in a small notebook labeled language. Still, the old loop pushed back. One Friday, determined to fix it, she curated the perfect evening. Dinner, music, candles. Halfway through a kiss, she felt herself lift out of the moment, as if watching from the ceiling. Dissociation arrived like an old, punctual guest. She froze, then pretended she hadn't. Later, she cried quietly in the shower, careful not to let the sound travel through the door. The following session, Bhumi braced for judgment. It didn't come. You didn't fail, the therapist said. You learned your edge. Edges are cartography. So what do I do with the edge? We respect it until it moves. Muscles unlearn faster than memory. Safety rewires faster than fear. They added consent with self. Ask inwardly before any touch, even lotion on the thigh. Yes means proceed slowly. Maybe means pause. No means gratitude and redirect. Practicing alone felt awkward, almost childish, which secretly helped. Children are allowed to begin. She told Rakesh about the exercises. I want us to try slower, not less. Slower, with words. He nodded, relief flickering through caution. That night they attempted 1 minute, 1 touch, 1 check-in. 30 seconds in, her breath shortened. Pause, she asked. He stopped immediately. The room didn't shatter. The pause didn't mean rejection. It meant rhythm. Afterward, he said, I'd rather know you than impress you. Gratitude pooled behind her ribs like warm water. Another loop appeared, the grief loop. As safety grew, so did mourning for years spent outside herself. Tears visited without warning. Elevators, traffic lights, folding laundry. Tears and freedom often come hand in hand, the therapist said. Pleasure live in the same nervous system, the therapist said. When one returns, it often invites the other. Bhumi tended to her environment the way she tended to clients' rooms, but this time for sensation, not aesthetics. Harsh lamps became softer ones. Clothes that pinched went to donation. Windows opened. None of it was sexual. All of it was preparation, telling her body, without words, you are welcome here. Ananya sent a flyer for a women's circle, consent and nervous system literacy. Bhumi almost said no, then remembered her new rule, curiosity before courage. She went. The facilitator spoke of micro yeses, tiny agreements that build trust, changing posture when numbness arrives, a hand over the heart before decisions, stopping, because stopping is also an action. The language felt like water finding cracks. After the circle, Bhumi walked home slowly, mapping the city by sensation, cool air on her forearms, the weight of her bag, the steady rhythm of sandals against pavement. This is how I want intimacy to feel, she thought. Located, punctual, honest. One night, alone in the living room, she tried a small ritual the therapist had suggested. Lights low, phone outside the room, a blanket like a shoreline. She let the inhale lengthen 2 counts beyond habit, then placed her palm over her sternum. "Where do you feel welcome?" she asked inwardly. Heat gathered beneath her hand. She moved no further. The rule was simple: stop while the body still says yes. When she stood to leave, she felt a quiet victory. Leaving before bracing felt like learning a new alphabet. The next week brought a setback. A stressful client meeting, a family call layered with expectations, and the sudden return of numbness like frost. She feared the progress had been imaginary. That night, she almost reached for the old script: prove, perform, push. Instead, she chose the smallest option: stand by the window and breathe until one part of her softened. It took 7 minutes. She wrote 7- press dash. She had mint dashes, but the symbol automatically stretched, a line on the screen connecting words like hands. Minutes to return, accreditation for a skill no school had taught. Rakesh noticed the changes even when he didn't understand them. "You're different," he said, quieter but not far. "I'm trying to be here," she answered. "With me?" "With me first," she said and waited. He nodded slowly. "Teach me how to meet you there." They began to speak a new language in the dark, questions instead of assumptions, pauses instead of apologies. One night, he asked, "What would make this moment feel safe?" She surprised herself. "Light on, blanket over our legs. 5 breaths where we don't move." They did exactly that. The moment did not escalate, it deepened. Days later, after tidying the bedroom, Bhumi placed a smooth, palm-sized stone on her nightstand, an anchor she could hold when breath wandered. The gesture felt ceremonial, like setting a bell on an altar, not to summon anything, only to remember. She was not at the finish line. There would be no finish line. But the distance between her and herself had narrowed to a space she could cross in ordinary evenings. One more step remained. Not dramatic, not performative, just honest. She turned off the overhead light, left the lamp warm, and stood barefoot on the rug, listening for the part of her that had stopped hiding. It answered with a steadier breath, the promise of a door half opened. The next choice would be small and brave and hers. It happened on an evening that looked ordinary. Monsoon drizzle on the window, the faint hum of traffic below, the kind of quiet that felt suspended between endings and beginnings. Bhumi had finished her work early, and Rakesh was out visiting a friend. The apartment was finally still. She made tea, let it cool on the counter, and sat cross-legged on the floor. The lamp cast a soft amber halo, and the air smelled faintly of rain and cardamom. On impulse, she reached for the stone on her nightstand, the small one she'd been using as an anchor, and rolled it between her palms until the rhythm movement matched her breath. For months she had been circling this moment, but always with strategy, as if calm could be scheduled. Tonight there was no plan, only the quiet truth. She wanted to meet herself, not as a task, not as a cure, but as a companion she had ignored too long. She began the same way her therapist had taught her, feet pressed into the rug, attention descending slowly from thought to pulse. "Where has your breath stopped?" she asked inwardly. The answer came softer this time. "Nowhere." Her hands rested on her belly, light as prayer. Warmth bloomed, not sudden, not dramatic, but steady. The mind rushed in. "What does this mean?" And she answered with patience. "It means you are here." The air thickened, almost humming. Sensations she used to dismiss as irrelevant, weight, temperature, texture, felt amplified. Speaking a language she finally understood. Tears welled before pleasure did, and she let them. Tears and pleasure live in the same nervous system, her therapist's voice echoed. Sometimes one must arrive first. She stayed with the tears until they softened into breath. Then came a quiet expansion, a spreading warmth low in her abdomen, an exhale that felt like years unclenching. There was no fantasy, no image, no performance, only presence, the body's way of saying, I was never broken, I was waiting. She didn't chase the sensation, she followed it the way one follows light through water, slowly, reverently, ready to stop if asked. When it rose, she let it. When it faded, she whispered, thank you. The moment passed without climax, yet everything inside her had shifted. For the first time, her body felt like home. Not a mystery, not an obligation, but a room she could finally inhabit without fear. When Rakesh returned later, she met him at the door with a softness he hadn't seen before. Are you okay? He asked, half smiling. Yes, she said, voice steady. I just remembered something. What? That I'm alive. He didn't understand, not fully, but he knew something had shifted. For the first time, he heard softness in her silence, which felt like home. Felt it in the way she touched his arm, gentle, grounded, present. That night, she fell asleep without rehearsing the next step. The breath moved on its own, uncoached, uncounted. And somewhere between one inhale and the next, she realized that the journey she had been chasing wasn't toward pleasure or perfection, it was toward presence. The body had finally answered back, and its first word was peace. After that night, Bhumi's world didn't explode with change, it softened into it. Mornings felt different before she even opened her eyes. The familiar tightness around her ribs was gone, replaced by a quiet spaciousness she couldn't quite explain. She still followed her routines, tea, music, a check of emails, but now there was breath between each step, as if time had loosened its grip. She noticed things she had never truly seen before, how sunlight folded through the curtains in thin golden stripes, how steam curled off her tea before vanishing, how her own pulse sounded like ocean waves when she placed a hand over her heart. These were not revelations. They were reminders, signs that life had always been trying to reach her, even when she was too disciplined to notice. Work didn't change, but her presence within it did. During client meetings, she listens with her whole body, catching subtleties in tone and posture. Her design shifted too, less about perfection, more about warmth, texture, space to breathe. Your work feels alive lately, her manager said. Bhumi smiled. So do I. Rakesh sensed it most. There was no grand confession, no dramatic breakthrough, just subtle gestures, her leaning in during a conversation, her laughter arriving sooner, her hand resting on his arm without thought. Intimacy returned not through intensity, but through rhythm. One evening, they sat on the balcony as the sky turned copper. Rakesh reached for her hand. She didn't anticipate it, didn't perform it. She simply felt it. The skin, the weight, the quiet pulse beneath it. And in that moment, connection replaced effort. Later, when they made love, it wasn't cinematic or sudden. It was slow, honest, built on the same principles she had learned from her own breath. Permission, patience, presence. For the first time, she didn't measure the experience by reaction or result. She felt herself inside it, alive, listening, belonging. Afterward, she lay beside him, not searching for meaning, just breathing. The stillness that followed didn't feel empty anymore. It felt complete. In her journal, she wrote, "Healing doesn't arrive like lightning. It grows like dawn, gradual, inevitable, impossible to unsee once it begins." She no longer needed to prove her wholeness through effort. The peace she'd once pursued through control now lived quietly in the rhythm of her lungs. And each morning, as she touched the smooth stone on her nightstand before rising, she remembered the truth that had remade her life. Pleasure was never the goal. Presence was. And when presence finally returned, pleasure followed. Faithful, natural, and free. Weeks turned into months, and Bhumi began to understand that transformation is rarely loud. It moves like breath, unseen but constant, reshaping the space inside without asking permission. What had started as a desperate search for pleasure had become a quiet education in being alive. She reread the first pages of her old journal one afternoon, the ones written in confusion, full of whys and what's wrong with me. She didn't flinch this time. She smiled, almost tenderly, at the woman who had once mistaken numbness for failure. That version of her hadn't been lost. She had simply been learning in silence. Bhumi began to teach fragments of what she'd learned to her clients. Not about sexuality directly, but about presence. She would say, "Start where your breath is," or "Safety is the first language your body speaks." She noticed how those words softened faces, how people exhaled when they heard them, as if their own bodies waiting for the same permission. At home, her connection with Rakesh had deepened, not because everything became perfect, but because imperfection no longer felt threatening. When distance appeared, she didn't rush to fill it. She listened to it. When silence stretched between them, she trusted it as part of the rhythm, not the end of it. Bhumi realized that intimacy was never about doing more. It was about doing less, until only truth remained. She also stopped searching for validation in external voices, therapists, books, checklists. Wisdom had become internal now, embodied. When tension returned, she placed her hand over her heart and whispered, "You're safe." The body always answered with warmth, as if grateful to be asked. One evening, sitting near the window, she wrote her final reflection in her journal. The body doesn't rush healing. It listens. It remembers. It forgives when we do. And with that, she understood what had changed most. She was no longer waiting for her body to respond to her life. She was finally living in rhythm with it. On the last evening of the year, Bhumi sat on her balcony as fireworks pulsed across the city skyline. The world was loud, alive, overflowing with color. But inside her, there was only calm. She remembered the woman she used to be, efficient, polite, and quietly terrified of her own stillness. The woman who mistook control for confidence and silence for virtue. Now that silence had changed its meaning, it was no longer the sound of suppression. It was the sound of peace. The night air was cool, the kind that invites reflection. She held her journal, tracing the faint grooves of the final page. I thought I was trying to learn pleasure, but what I really learned was trust. And trust, once restored, touches everything. She thought about how far she had come, from hiding behind routine to listening to the smallest hum of her own body. The journey had not been about rebellion or breaking rules. It had been about coming home. As she closed the journal, her gaze drifted to the street below, A couple laughing, a child tugging at a parent's hand, an older woman standing alone yet radiant in the light of the fireworks. Life was not separated into categories of fulfilled and unfulfilled anymore. It was all one flow, breathing and unfolding in time. Bhumi smiled softly, realizing that her story was not hers alone. Every woman carries an untold story between survival and sensation, between guilt and grace. Some learn early, others much later. But the return always begins the same way, with a breath, a pause, and the courage to listen. The fireworks faded into smoke. She placed the journal beside her, leaned back, and let her breath follow its own rhythm. If you have ever felt disconnected from your body, from your emotions, from the quiet pulse that once made you feel alive, maybe this story found you for a reason. Maybe it's a mirror, not a movie. Take a moment tonight. Turn off the noise. Place a hand over your chest, another over your abdomen, and breathe until you feel something real stir beneath your palms. You don't need to chase pleasure or perform peace. Both will come when you stop demanding proof of them. The body always knows the way home. All it's ever needed is your attention. And as Bhumi learned, once you finally listen, really listen, everything else begins to answer back.